school community and writing a response. Is that fair to say, Chair, that that's what it would entail based on previous practice? Thank you.
That's correct, Councillor McAuliffe. Okay, you've heard Councillor McAuliffe. Seconder, okay, nobody in the chamber. Will go to WebEx with Councillor John Coyle.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second Councillor McAuliffe's proposal to write and to engage with the local school community. It's a vital amenity in a 5 Mile Town area, and it needs to be retained. So we are happy to support in any way we can. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Coyle. Okay, it is be proposed and seconded. We all agreed? Great, thank you. Carrying on with the matters arising, still on page 3. Page 4, Chief Executive.
Chair, just to draw members' attention to the correspondence received from the Department of Health. This is regarding the update on the Maple Healthcare GMS contract, and you'll see from the letter that the interviews were held on the Tuesday, the 31st of January, and a new contractor has been appointed, and that will be effective from the 1st of June 2023.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Go to the chamber, and first up is Councillor Victor Warrington.
Thank you, Chair. Well, certainly this is a bit of more positive news for a change in the Lisnaskea area, and I certainly welcome it. And hopefully everything will go according to plan. And I will propose the noting of this letter. Thank you.
You're proposing to note, okay, and hopefully I have a seconder to note here. Go now to Councillor Eamon Keenan in the chamber.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, I'd also agree it's definitely positive, but still we haven't got much information at the minute. I had proposed that as soon as we find out who the new contractor is, that we actually request to meet them as a council. I do know that the local community health committee intends to do the same, but I think as a council we could meet them to welcome them and also to raise the concerns that the community has. Thanks.
Okay, so you're happy to second the noting of the correspondence first of all, and you're making that a proposal. And thank you. I'm assuming we have a seconder here in Councillor Dolola Coffey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to second that proposal. I think it's very important that we have clarification on the status of this new provider. You know, it's been stated previously that there is a threat to, you know, from private medicine and private GPs coming in. And I just want to highlight the fact, because it was stated that you know, that this is another scaremongering episode, that people may be charged to actually access GPs. But it is not long ago in Rosslea, when the GP service there was closed, that residents in that village were actually forced through dint of necessity to access a pay to see a GP service operated in a local pharmacist at a cost, I think it was, if I remember right, it was either 55 or 60 pounds to speak to a doctor in South Belfast. And so it is a very real threat, as far as I'm concerned, that we face. This is, however, good news if this turns out to be a standard GP operation, and I would welcome that, and I'm certainly looking forward to clarification. On another matter, I have another matter to raise on page 4, Chair. I don't know if anyone else wants to.
We'll deal with this one first, if you don't mind. And okay, you seconded the proposal there. I take it we're all agreed, although we have several speakers coming in here via WebEx. And first up is Councillor Thomas O'Reilly via WebEx.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I too welcome the announcement that there is a new provider willing to take the contract. Can I propose, Chair, that we actually write back and see if we can, I'm impatient to find out who this contractor is going to turn out to be. And certainly, you know, I agree with Emmett there that we are not Emmett, Eamon, that we want to actually get as much information and be able to relay our constituents' concerns to the new provider as soon as we can. But it would be helpful if we could actually write back and find out who the provider is and initiate that correspondence between ourselves and the new contract holder as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Reilly. Next up via WebEx with Councillor Seamus Green.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is very welcome and positive news, I believe. It has to be welcomed. I would also like to know a wee bit more about the provider, but I would just note there that a previous councillor there couldn't help but continue to scaremonger. The GP service that was in Grosslea was a free GP service. It was moved to Skye. There was problems with it because it was oversubscribed, but nobody was forced to participate in the GP private service that was in the pharmacy. That was anyone, just the same as if anyone at any time could pay to go to see a GP wherever they want. Nobody was forced to do that. And again, a scaremonger, not the worst type. But anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Are you happy to second Councillor Riley's proposal?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And we're moving on now. We have, if you can lower your hand, please, Councillor Green. We have now Councillor Dr. Josephine Dehan via WebEx.
Good evening, Chair, and thank you. And Chair, I certainly do want to welcome this piece of correspondence, and I'm very pleased and very relieved indeed that the patients of Maple Healthcare will be in a position to access primary care services after the 1st of June. It is important that every resident has the opportunity to be registered with a practice, with a GP, and to be able to access those services as and when they are needed, and also free at the point of delivery. Councillor O'Coffey refers to private general practitioners, and yes, in the same way as there are private hospital specialists that you can access for a fee, operating out of Kingsbridge Hospital, the Ulster Independent Clinic, and all of those private facilities, it is definitely possible to see a GP privately. And of course, for those who are prepared to pay a fee and also to pay for the investigations that the GP requests, that service is available. Chair, I am opposed to that system because it creates a two-tier service. Those who can afford to pay to access medical care can do so at a time of their choosing and at a timely and in a timely way. And that type of service should be made available under the NHS. Unfortunately, Chair, as we know through having had many debates in this chamber, GP services are under severe threat, and no more so than in the Southwest Federation area, where in rural practices there is ongoing difficulty in attracting young GPs to work in rural practices. So I think that we there needs to be a radical overhaul in the way in which primary care services are being delivered. At present, the Northern Ireland GP Committee is negotiating with the Department of Health to look at the GP contract to see what way it can be amended and supported to encourage young doctors to become general practitioners in our area. This is critical for the ongoing delivery of our service, and this is something that we need to keep under close surveillance, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Just within the time there, Councillor Dehan. Thank you. And now we go to the chamber. We have Councillor Rosemary Barton.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I too welcome this this news that there is to be a new contract for this practice. But I'm wondering, in the letter that perhaps has been proposed that we write to the Department of Health regarding this, regarding the new contract, that we could also make inquiries about the progress on the new Maple Health Clinic that
I'm sure
was
that
proposed to be
I'm sure
built.
the proposer and seconders are happy enough to have that in their proposal.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And can we now go to WebEx, and we have Councillor Emmett McAleer, who will be the last speaker on the issue. Councillor Dehan, if you can lower your hand, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me all right, just I'm on the phone
Yep.
at the minute here. And I know Councillor O'Coffey stated he's a related matter, but if the discussion is completed on this particular issue, I've an issue to raise on page 4 as well of the meeting, and I'm happy enough with what has been submitted to date. I think you said I was the last one to speak here.
Yeah, we're dealing with this issue first, and then we'll move on the page then after that. So
Right, well, I suppose it's part of this, but I'm happy enough then to conclude this and come back in
we'll
whenever we...
conclude this issue and get agreement. Okay, thank you. Yeah, you have 3 proposals and they've all been seconded, and are we all agreed? I'm not seeing any dissent on the issue. So that's... Yeah. Councillor McAleer, if you can lower your hand at this stage. Councillor Coffey had indicated first. So we're moving on page 4, and Councillor Coffey. Hold on, just get you in.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's the issue that's minuted at the bottom of that, which is effectively was not just the silencing, but the exclusion of myself, Councillor McAleer and Keenan. I want to put on record that the account that is provided here is simply is not accurate. I have to say, I was excluded from the meeting for, as far as I can see, 2 things which are protected explicitly under standing orders, one of which is requesting a point of order, which was not heard by yourself, which I believe is a breach of standing orders. But the second point is that I requested a recorded vote on an item which required a vote. I was excluded from the meeting on grounds of Standing Order 25.3, which was not voted upon, contrary to the actual rules of the Standing Order. But even worse, 25.3 is not to exclude members, it's actually to silence members. And it also states here that we dissented from the decision. I was not afforded any opportunity to dissent from the decision. Moreover, I was not, it says, following further interruptions after we were silenced, according to these minutes. We were then interrupting. I don't know how we did that if we were silenced, which is again untrue, and it does not reflect what happened in the night. And I think I have to say that I try to treat everyone in this council with respect and respect of different political stances, but I do not accept being subject to political exclusion by anyone, and I include even yourself, Chair, in that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Coffey. We'll bring Councillor McAleer on this one now via WebEx. Councillor Emmett McAleer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's exactly on the points raised by Councillor O'Coffey, and I would actually go further. And this minute was signed off for accuracy at last week's full council meeting, and I would actually contend that that sentence, that statement, which is that following further interruptions from Councillors Keenan, McAleer and O'Coffey, the Chair ruled that they be excluded from the meeting, was not actually contained in the minute last week when we signed off on accuracy. I spoke during last week's meeting to raise my objections to the way which we had been treated, and said I would be speaking further on it during the course of this meeting. I'm actually concerned that this has been subsequently added, and I went back today and re-listened to the meeting in question. Councillor O'Coffey's account is 100% accurate. Councillor Keenan was put out. He came in to speak twice when he had not his hand raised or wasn't afforded the opportunity as chair. You accused him of coming in, interrupting the meeting for the 4th time, which was inaccurate. He was then excluded, or you requested that a proposal be put forward that he be excluded. When both Councillor O'Coffey and myself came in to object to the implementation and the incorrect implementation of standing orders, we were then subsequently removed, and Councillor O'Coffey is 100% correct in stating that he requested that the standing orders be correctly implemented, and that he requested legal opinion or legal advice. And your response was simply no. And further than that, you said that my decision is final. It's my decision. End of. When Councillor Coffey asked for legal request, can I call for legal opinion, please, Chair? You know, this is a silencing, and it's an incorrect use of standing orders. And again, just to emphasise and reinforce what's been said, we were silenced. We were all attending the meeting virtually. We had our microphones put off, then locked. We couldn't physically interrupt the meeting, and yet we were further excluded. And I think I would contend again that that was known at the top table, because you made a statement asking me to lower my hand, and you followed that up by saying if you can even hear me at this stage. So there was a note that 3 participants were moved to the lobby several minutes after that. We were excluded from following the meeting. We could log on to follow the YouTube.
9 seconds, Councillor.
But we were excluded from confidential business, and this is not a way to do business. So I would request and propose that we actually get legal opinion on the implementation of the standing order in question, because it's not been implemented correctly, and subsequently that an additional standing order was
I've
used.
given you latitude there now, Councillor, and I know Councillor Keenan's come in on the same issue. You brought out of time. Thank you. Councillor Keenan in the chamber.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, just as the previous 2 speakers have said, the minutes are inaccurate and false. They're very misleading. It's my recollection of the meeting is exactly as the 2 other speakers have described. I watched the video today again, and the last sentence in the minutes there that says, the chair ruled that the members be excluded from the meeting. Chair, you never said that. You said you asked for a proposer and a seconder that we be silenced, not excluded, but we were then excluded, using the incorrect standing order. And I'd like to second Emma's proposal. Like that meeting was a disgrace, but and now the minutes now trying to hide the way that it actually happened. So, thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Keenan. I now bring the Chief Executive in for issues of clarification on the issue, on that matter. Right.
Well, just very briefly, Chair, I suppose there's been some comments regarding the minutes. I suppose 2 aspects. Firstly, they have been adopted as an accurate record, and I think there was an inference that the minute had somehow been changed between the adoption of the council meeting and this evening. That's not correct. So the minutes before you that matters arising are drawn from are the minutes as formally adopted by the council. The second point, Chair, in relation to your interpretation, I would just draw members' attention to Standing Order 29, which is saying that any proceedings of the council, subject to the chairperson giving a reason for any ruling, the ruling of the chairperson as to the interpretation, construction or application of any of these standing orders as to any proceedings of the council shall not be challenged at any meeting of the council. So there's really nothing further I can add. Your ruling is final in all matters, as is any committee chair or council chair.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Chief Executive, for the clarification of those issues. I'm not intending that again against Councillor Coffey at this stage. There's been a proposal on the table, set by Councillor McAleer, seconded by Councillor Keenan, that we seek, or that you want legal advice on this issue. Is there agreement on that? No. Okay. Okay, we'll go to the vote on that. And just yeah, that's fine. Recorded vote. Councillor McGuire.
Chair, just for clarification there, Standing Order 29, as indicated by the Chief Executive, stated that your ruling under that was correct. So would that require any further procedure? Again, with
Chief
your
Executive.
authority, Chair?
Yeah, well, it's been requested that we have legal advice, and I'm not objecting to it. Okay, your vote should be set up. Oh, there we are now. Okay. Okay, Chief Executive, we have the result of the vote which
Yes.
is requested and recorded vote.
Okay, Chair, so there were 15 votes for, 15 votes against. The Chair's casting vote was against, so therefore the proposal falls.
Okay. Okay, we can close the vote there, Donald. That'll be great. Thank you. Okay, on to matters arising again, and if people can just lower their hands or switch off there. I'm taking no more debate on this issue at this moment in time. We're going on now to page 5, no matters arising. Page 5, Chief Executive. Nothing for you. Page 6. Page 7. Chief Executive. Okay, we have a bit of silence here, please. Page 7.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Just roughly midway down page 7, this is the response from the Western Health and Social Care Trust to the Council's concerns regarding the consultation arrangements as currently proposed regarding the consultation on South West Acute Hospital. And Chair, I would also maybe draw members' attention at this point to the letter in your normal correspondence folder from Derry City and Strabane District Council, which is seeking the Council's support for their request for there to be a consultation event in the Derry City and Strabane District Council area. And you'll have seen they've also adopted a motion of support for the retention of services. So just those two items we would deal with at this juncture, please, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Chief Executive. Sorry, Donald, if you can close that screen there. There we are. Okay. First off is Councillor Emmett McAleer in the chamber.
Thanks, Chair. Hand up to come in there just with the previous item there.
Okay, we've
There's
moved
no
on from
reference to Standing Order 29 being ordered.
Sorry, we're
on
moved
anything.
on from
That's
that.
just very strange. In relation to this item, again, this was something that I'd raised previously, and it was something that I raised when we met in the Owen Killieu Centre with the trust. This notion that's recorded in terms of the correspondence that the Chief Executive of the Western Trust notes that the Trust has worked with FODC colleagues in the planning for these events. And we do believe we have made arrangements which provide for and are appropriate to the levels of expected attendance in order to ensure that in each area of the Council's geography, people have the opportunity to have their voices heard. Now, as I say, I've raised this previously. The timing of these meetings to clash with Council events, Council meetings and committee meetings automatically has meant that they're prohibitive for elected representatives, or they're presenting a dilemma for elected reps who have to choose whether they're going to attend that specific council or committee meeting or whether they're going to attend one of these consultations. And related to the previous item, we are the elected voice of the people that we're here to serve. We're the voices of our DEAs, respectively. And to have us excluded in such a way, and I note that yourself, Chair, as a Omagh Town councillor, you are forced to choose between attending the consultation in the leisure centre in Omagh or attending the rates setting meeting of this district area. Like, that's a choice no one should have to make in this day and age. I think it's hardly a good example of working collaboratively or in encouraging voices to be heard. So we'll just make that maybe as a wee note. I'm happy to acknowledge the correspondence from Derry City and Strabane Council. I think that's a hugely positive thing. And I note that I suppose some of the comment that is included within that correspondence, again, was something that Councillor Barton raised on the night in the Owen Killieu Centre, that there should be some additional consultations or clinics held in some of the respective areas of the southern end of that particular district area. So hopefully that is something they progress with, although I suppose it stands to be seen what input maybe participate in this consultation after the decision has been made will have. Thank you, Chair.
So you're proposing also the noting of those pieces of correspondence. Thank you, Councillor McAleer. Next up in the chamber with Councillor Adam Gannon.
Thank you, Chair. Disappointed, obviously, with the response. There's a lot of Fermanagh that hasn't been covered by these consultations. And as Councillor McAleer also said, the way it was arranged, that it clashed with some very important council meetings. Well, it might have been on purpose, who knows? Maybe they didn't look at the timing, or maybe they did, the Trust, when they were organising. But anyhow, Chair, obviously thankful for the support from Derry and Strabane there, and would actually have two proposals to make off the back of it, Chair. One, that we write to the Trust to request that they facilitate a consultation event in Derry. This is bad for everyone in the Western Trust, and including the people in Derry, and even they also, even though they're not as badly affected as here, they have serious concerns about the management of the Trust and the way that this has been done, and would like to, I know many people there who would like to express their concern at how this has all been handled as well. As well as that, Chair, my second proposal would be that we write to all of the district councils in the north and ask that they respond to the consultation being positive and supportive of retaining services at the Southwest Acute Hospital, because it's happened here, it's happened in Daisy Hill, it will happen in other hospitals. And whilst there is no Stormont and no MLAs and no minister, all the councils should come together in protection and in support of local health services, no matter where they are, because simply moving a service in this manner, which has been totally unacceptable, could happen anywhere, and it shouldn't have happened anywhere to begin with. It shouldn't have happened here, and I'm sure every single elected representative across the north and councils would agree that this has been disastrously done and would not want this done in their area, Chair. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Just a point on that, Councillor Gannon, you're happy to second the noting?
Oh yes,
Councillor McAleer.
Thank you.
And on the back of that, you've brought up two proposals. First of all, to write to the Western Health and Social Care Trust And then also, your second proposal is to write to all councils in Northern Ireland and asking for their support with regard to what's happening at the Southwest Acute Hospital in Enniskillen. Have we got a seconder for those two proposals? We'll move on. Councillor Coffey is coming in, hopefully, with a seconder here.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm happy to second those proposals, and I welcome the fact that Councillor Gannon appears to be taking a stance against the Bangor reconfiguration agenda, which I think is a destructive policy in relation to our NHS services. And it is one designed to actually close down small rural acute hospitals. And obviously, the number one target, I think, for the policymakers has been repeatedly the Southwest Acute Hospital in Enniskillen. I want to welcome the correspondence received from Derry City and Strabane. It is very positive that we have such solidarity expressed by that neighbouring council area. I also want to welcome the fact that on the picket lines last month, when health workers were striking for improved pay, safe staffing and services, that there were banners held in Altnagelvin and other hospitals across Northern Ireland in solidarity with the service provision in SWA. I think that's very important, and it shows the unity of health workers behind the notion that every area should have access to life-saving treatments. The correspondence before us from the Weston Trust is really, it's quite difficult to reconcile with the reality that we've experienced in terms of the consultative process. The idea that somehow the ticket-only system that was imposed on the public by the Trust was there to actually sufficiently manage access when the reports have come back, both that people who attempted to book a ticket and a seat were actually unable to do so and then give up. And then on other occasions when it was initially set up, it actually requested information about the occupations of those who were to attend, and that would have been extremely off-putting to any workers in the health service. The experience in the consultations themselves, and I've attended all 4 consultations in Fermanagh, has been quite shocking. The fact that the police were called out to protect the trust from the people, the fact that there were literally, large numbers of security personnel paid for to again protect the trust from the people. It's, people have recognized that this is a very, negative development. People were not even allowed to hold the mic after the first night. I myself was never allowed to speak, and the one time I did get to speak, reminiscent of perhaps other venues, but the one time I did manage to get a mic, which was passed to me by another person in the consultation, my mic was turned off. The trust representatives walked out of the room, and the meeting was closed. So that's the respect that's going to councillors that have a democratic mandate, and I think that's completely unacceptable. This is a sham consultation, and I'm encouraging members of the public to not engage with the leading questions, but to actually submit their own ones, which are much more positive and ambitious. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up in the chamber, we have Councillor Bernice Swift.
Garamagat, Kerlock, and just responding to the correspondence received, the Trust have assured us in their letter that they would continue to keep the matter under review regarding the consultation events. And as you will remember, I had taken exception at the very start of how the process was going to be engaged with the ticketed events and all of that other members have already talked about. And given the fact that I represent the rural west of Fermanagh and the concerns are out in the rural west and obviously the other rural areas, I would very much and strongly advocate now that we contact the WHSCT again and ask them to most definitely facilitate more events in the rural region. We have women now who are speaking loudly and clearly about the difficulties that we are hearing on the maternity services. And as a woman as well, I feel it is imperative that we speak and give voice to all the people who are concerned on this particular issue. And that's notwithstanding the other emergency general surgery services and indeed all of our waiting lists. So to that end, I ask that we contact them. And I am aware, Chief Executive, we have the meeting on Friday. I will not be in attendance this Friday, unfortunately, because I have plenty to say and ask, but I'll submit those in addition to questions already submitted to the Trust. But I would, at this point, be advocating that they most definitely facilitate in the areas of Garrison, Derragonley and Derrylin. And we would hope then that the people from Kinawley and Kalesher will come to those events. The Belcoo facilitated meeting, while it was largely attended and lots of very serious questions were asked, there's a lot of my voting constituency and the people that have not been able to manage to attend. And that's just not good enough in any democracy. And I would like to make a further point. It is still disgraceful that we do not have a central government up and running to address all of these issues. Also, other information that became apparent at the Belcoo meeting regarding the Minister and some of the, I suppose, the legalities that he had rubber stamped and other issues that he didn't manage to have a say on. And as we all know, the buck stops with the Minister. So we have lots of issues and lots of problems still. So I'd ask the Chief Executive if we'll probably not get an answer, obviously, to a letter, but if it's firmly on the agenda this Friday, that would be good for all the rural areas that we represent. Agate.
Thank you for that, Councillor Swift. Maybe bring the Chief Executive in to maybe clarify that. And I know that we have a letter going to the Western Health and Social Care Trust proposed by Councillor Gallen and seconded by Councillor Coffey. Can that be encompassed?
Certainly, Chair, but I suppose just to confirm, we would do both, obviously, the written representations from this evening, but we'll certainly include it formally on the agenda for Friday as well.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Swift. Now on to Councillor Diane Armstrong in the Chamber.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and I would concur with the last two speakers. It's interesting to see that it does in the first page, third paragraph, say that people have the opportunity to have their voices heard, and quite obviously Councillor Swift feels that her constituents are not being heard. So I would support that, and particularly the comments made on women's voices who have been speaking very forthrightly. I do notice on page 2 that they recognise that the online registration system has been simplified. There were a lot of problems with that. But I still find the whole process very chaotic and hard to understand, because with regard to the public consultation, there is a document where you fill in the public consultation document itself and you can answer the questions there. But there's a second document, the consultation questionnaire itself, but on the consultations on NI Direct, there are similar questions, but not quite the same. So this is quite confusing. There's no clear line there which questionnaire you're to fill in. The original consultation document, yes, if you come up with an alternative solution, which is what they're inviting, there is a facility there to do that. But on the website for consultations on NI Direct, there isn't. So I just find it confusing. There's been a lot of mixed messaging going through the whole process. It is regrettable, but I would encourage further consultation where it mentions people have the opportunity to have their voices heard. I would hope that we're going to hear responses on what has been raised, and that we've made that a consistent request, and we'll look forward to Friday's meeting to pose more questions from the Trust. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Armstrong. Now we're on to Councillor Eamon Keenan in the Chamber.
Thank you, Chair. On the latter of the British request that I'd like to maybe include Rusley as a venue as well. It's an area that hasn't been covered yet. With regards to the reply from the Trust, I don't think it's comparable with the reality at all of what we've seen of the consultation. The reality of the consultation that I seen, that most people seen, was that sorry,
carry on.
First of all, the Trust, basically the advertisement of the consultation from the Trust was non-existent, only for the SOAS group and councillors and members of the public. There was very little advertisement of where the consultation meetings were being held. When you got to the consultation meetings then, they were very restricted via the booking system. They were directed, and the microphone system was very poor. And there was also, as Donald says, a very heavy police presence, which was felt by some people intended to try to intimidate the health supporters, which I believe is a disgrace. I don't think it worked, but I think that was the intention. So I wasn't actually surprised by the organisers of this consultation, but yeah, that's my points on it.
Yeah, and Councillor Swift had made some comments earlier on. The Chief Executive clarified that position, and that it'll be all encompassed into the one proposal, the two proposals which were made. Okay. Are you happy to second that proposal, Councillor Keenan? Okay, thank you. On to Councillor Anthony Feely.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I was gonna second that, but yeah, I agree with a lot of the stuff that's been said by previous councillors there. And I was at the consultation event in Belcoo myself, and it was a pity that they clashed with the council meeting that night, so I had to make a choice. So I was there, and there was a very large crowd at it. So I would like to see another few meetings, like in the likes of Bernice's, Derrick, Lee Garrison, and Evening Rossley, because I think they would get a good crowd as well. But in the letter, if we could say if they are having these events, don't have them clashing with our council meetings if they could at all. If they could just look into that as well, that we could go to them. Thank you.
I think those points will be made on Friday as well when we have our meeting. So thanks for that, Councillor Feely. Now we go on to WebEx, and first councillor up is Councillor Matthew Bale.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I suppose I would like to amend Councillor Gannon's proposal slightly. He made mention of having an event in Londonderry. However, he may have meant the entire council district, but just to really hit the point home, I believe where the consultation event is needed is on our neighbouring DA next from Anoma Council in the Derg DA, as part of the Derg DA actually covers the SWAG catchment. So just to make that really clear. Councillor Gannon also made comments relating to Daisy Hill, but he doesn't have to look much further away than our own council district. As chair, you'll be more aware than me about the death of the old Tyrone County Hospital by a thousand cuts. And then lastly, Councillor Coffey made reference to how he was treated in Enniskillen. But I would like to say I went to the event in Omagh, and I asked a lady wearing a Fermanagh and Omagh district lanyard if I could have the opportunity to speak first, as I did have to go to our rates meeting, and they were more than flexible, and they allowed me to speak first, and I was treated with great respect. I was even allowed to hold the mic, and I just want to put my thanks for them to allow me to do that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Bell, and I'm sure Councillor Gallon's happy enough to encompass those comments, or are you? Maybe not. I'll bring you in on this stage.
No, Chair, generally happy. Maybe just to leave it open that it could be in multiple DEAs in the Derry and Strabane Council area, rather than specifically saying this one or not this one. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Clarification from our Chief Executive on this matter?
No, it's really just to note, Chair, that in the letter from Derry City and Strabane, it is specific that they're proposing that the public consultation be held in the southern part of the Derry City and Strabane, which typically would be the Derg DEA. So just
yeah. Okay, thanks for that, Chief Executive. And last speaker on this issue, and it's via WebEx, and it's Councillor Dr. Josephine Dahan.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Chair, I too was extremely disappointed to have missed the consultation event last Thursday. And again, it was really having to make a choice between attending a very important special meeting of Council to strike the rates and the event in Omagh Leisure Complex. Now, I'm glad that Councillor Bale was well received. But, you know, I think that I would welcome the opportunity to have further consultation events. I do intend to participate in the online events, but I think really it's hard to beat in these circumstances the face-to-face consultation. I welcome the letter from Derry and Strabane District Council. I think that the decision to suspend acute surgical services from the Southwest Acute Hospital will impact not only in our District Council area, but also in the Derry City and Strabane District Council as well. I think we can make a good case for further face-to-face consultations, given the recent concern expressed regarding our obstetric services at the Southwest Acute Hospital, and were that service to fall, which I sincerely hope it will not, then it does have huge implications for Altnagelvin Area Hospital as well. So we're all involved in it. We all need to make correct decisions. There is a huge amount at stake. The Western Trust is consulting because they have a statutory and a legal obligation to do so. Otherwise, they could be subject to judicial review. I'm very sorry, Chair, to hear about the experiences of Councillor O'Coffey and, you know, that type of attitude to elected representatives and members of the public is simply unacceptable. And I do not for one moment believe, Chair, that the people of Fermanagh and Omagh district represent any significant threat to the officers of the Western Health and Social Care Trust. And I think that, you know, the adoption of, over-the-top security, I think it only serves to undermine trust. And, you know, it really, I think, is definitely uncalled for. So I do support the call for further face-to-face consultation events and support the proposals thus far, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dr. Dehan. Okay, I think that brings that subject to a close. Several proposals have been made out of that, and they're all encompassed, and the Chief Executive's put her remarks on it as well. So I think we're all agreed. See no dissent. Thank you. Moving on in our page 7, page 8, page 9. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. Just at the bottom there of page 9, the response from the Department for Communities regarding the Council's representations and indeed those of others, councils and political leaders regarding the restitution of the rate support grant to its previous levels. And the Permanent Secretary has copied the wider correspondence that he issued to the party leaders of the main Stormont parties.
Thank you, Chief Executive. And first up in the chamber, if we can have a proposal to note, first of all, Councillor Coffey, it'd be great. Councillor Coffey.
Yeah, propose to note the correspondence. This is disgraceful as far as I can see. Effectively, an unelected permanent secretary has decided to cut the budgets for support funding to councils by almost like a third of the total under this rate support grant. And the intent seems to be that we're to survive off the money that somehow we managed to perhaps manage well in regard to COVID funding, which I do believe this council had actually set aside for grant aid to various projects in the council area. So I'd just like to ask the question to the Chief Executive, what is the implications for this for the funding that we had set aside in that fund? But this is genuinely a kick in teeth for the community here. We're just after discussing the failure of Stormont to actually sustain basic medical provision in our area, forcing people to travel up to 2.5 hours to receive emergency general surgery. And now, in a context where 55% of our rates goes to Stormont, we're losing even further funding from the Department for Communities. So this council is really coming under huge pressure from Stormont, and it's just not acceptable. And I think a lot of people I see talking about, why are we paying our rates? Why are we paying them to Stormont, especially 55% going to Stormont? People know what the council does. When we do it right, we collect the bins, we look after the grounds, we operate leisure facilities, arts. But what is Stormont doing for this area? So I think that there's a limit to people's patience with political failure. And in this case, we have an unelected head civil servant, a person who's presiding over a crisis in maintenance services in the housing executive at the moment, where, just deciding unilaterally to do this. This is disgraceful. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Coffey. And we'll go to WebEx, and we have Councillor Thomas O'Reilly. Maybe if you can second first of all the noting, Councillor O'Reilly.
Yes, Chair, second the noting. But I suppose very, very concerning here that once again our budget is being reduced and considerably reduced. Can I ask that we, first of all, is it my understanding that Belfast and Derry Strabane do not receive rate support grant here from central government? And secondly, where does this, maybe Chief Executive would be able to explain where this is in relation to other councils? How badly affected are we in relation to our other neighbouring councils with this cut, or is this a across the board cut to every council similarly? That's that point. And I suppose this is, it's very easy to lay the blame at Stormont Store. This is the effects of a reducing budget out of the UK subvention to this end of Ireland. And while we didn't see the major effect of that over the years, Chair, we are now seeing that major effect coming in, and our infrastructure is crumbling around us for want of a budget. And certainly as a local government, I think we need to be fighting very, very hard to sort of say, well, here, if we are not given the budget, we certainly can't be delivering, and that is just not acceptable. So I think we have got to ask to try and get this reversed, and to see what we can do and where we can go as 11 councils to make the case that the local government have been continuing to deliver. And you can't give money for COVID help, for cost of living help 1 month, and then the following month take it back under some other guise. So I would be looking for that and make that as a proposal, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor O'Reilly. And there's a couple of questions have been posed to the Chief Executive here by Councillor Coffey and yourself, and you've seconded the noting of the correspondence. Chief Executive.
Yes, Chair, I'll maybe work back, if I may, in relation to Councillor O'Reilly's inquiries. First of all, the rate support grant doesn't apply to all 11 councils, it applies to 7. And the whole purpose of the rate support grant was to equalise, or those councils that were poorer in the context of rate space would actually have an equalisation from central government. Derry and Strabane District Council are recipients of the rate support grant. To the best of my knowledge, Belfast is not. In terms of the impacts for us, members will be aware that in the context of last year's rate setting process, we had made an assumption that there would be a reduction in our budget, and there has been incrementally a reduction, which is obviously referenced in the Permanent Secretary's letter, and we took an assumption of £600,000. We were fortunate to have made such an assumption because we actually only got just very little more than that. Other of our colleagues in other councils had reasonably assumed that they would have got a similar intervention as in previous years, and actually ended up with a much lower allocation, which is where very particular challenges have emerged in our local authorities. I think there's a couple of things in the letter that members may wish to specifically consider by way of further representations, and then just in terms of Councillor O'Coffey's queries as well. I think the real concern of this letter, Chair, is that while the budget has been incrementally cut, there is a real risk that there won't be a budget for us next year. So you will have gone from a situation of the rate support grant supporting those councils which need this most to a situation that there will be no financial intervention. And certainly I don't think there's any comfort in this, that there will be protection. I think the second element is that it's unfortunate that this wasn't deemed a priority and ring-fenced, but that's the reality. There's no ring-fencing of the budget, so there is flexibility within the civil service to allocate to what is obviously deemed to be a more pressing priority for the budgets. In terms of Councillor O'Coffey's queries, we had made, in terms of our COVID reserves, Some transfers, one was obviously to our own cost of living fund and interventions of £250,000, and we had also made transfers in terms of the strategic capital projects and other grants. Those are the assumptions that we have continued across into the estimates. So this letter doesn't change that. All I think this letter does is probably give us a warning now that in this time, 12 months, if we have any budget of rate support grant, we will be doing very well indeed. But Catherine may wish to add, Chair.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Bring in Catherine Leonard,
Yeah.
Head of Finance.
Thank you, Chair. I think the Chief Executive has covered all of those points, and whilst there's a pot of money set aside for current year of 8.924 million, then there's the percentage allocation of that, and that's based on the wealth and the needs of one district council compared to all other district councils, and that percentage can change every year, but it's very much prescribed in terms of the calculation behind the statistics, making up the wealth and the needs of the council compared to the other councils that gets it. And Alison's quite correct. There are 7 councils in receipt of rate support grant and 4 not entitled to rate support grant in comparison to their wealth and needs. And the amount that Fermanagh District Council receive is the lowest element of funding across the 7 councils. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Catherine. I think there was a proposal in there as well from Councillor O'Reilly. Have we got a Councillor O'Reilly, can you just outline your proposal again and we'll get a seconder?
Yeah, Chair, I think it's absolutely disgraceful that we are, as Alison says, been put on not alone that we're reduced this year, but maybe put on notice that we won't get maybe at all next year around. So we need to be, first of all, looking to, I propose that we look to get a rescinding of this and a refunding of this cut that we have received this year, and make the case very strongly that we are in need of this money, and that unless we fight that case now, we certainly will have nothing next year.
Thank you, Councillor O'Reilly. Go to Councillor Feely.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no problem seconding that.
Okay. Okay, you've heard your proposal noted, and you've also heard the proposal from Councillor Thomas O'Reilly, seconded by Councillor Anthony Feely. Are we all agreed? Okay, I'm not seeing any dissent in the chamber or via WebEx, so thank you for that. Okay, moving on again in Still Matters Rising, page 10, page 11, and page 12. On page 12, Councillor McAleer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and again, it's in relation to item 10.1, and I suppose the rather embarrassing proposal and discussion, which if it was only embarrassing, I wouldn't be referencing it, but it's actually the way it panned out, the way it continued, it was actually turning into quite a dangerous discussion that people were going to be intentionally excluded from meetings going forward. I note explicitly referenced in the minute in front of us are standing orders 25.3 and or 25.4. What isn't noted and which was claimed to be the standing order that was used was 29. There's no reference to that whatsoever again at this point. And just in terms of what's actually contained, the first line, the opening part of standing order 29, subject to the chairperson giving a reason for any ruling. Now, I would contend that no reason, or indeed no adequate reason, was given. When Councillor O'Coffey asked for a legal opinion, saying, "Can I have a legal opinion, please, Chair?" the response was, "No, it's my decision, end off." I don't think that's a reason. I would query whether an interruption, seeking clarification or an apology, which is what Councillor Keenan was accused of, is a valid reason to exclude someone from a meeting. And again, seeking legal guidance or clarification on a point of order. I'm wondering, do they actually qualify? Because my concern is, yeah, certainly what's happening here is myself and Donal and Eamon were excluded from the meeting. But behind that, you're talking about 2,903 first preference voters across this district. You're talking about over 3,500 voters in total, which were silenced for the majority and the remainder of that meeting. And this is very concerning, not only because our voices were silenced, but also because this seems to be a tactic that's now been enthusiastically approached by members of a party who had tried previously and failed to have minority and dissenting voices excluded from committees. So that's something that I'm seriously concerned with. And I think the really concerning part to top that all off is that it seems to be accepted that this is reasonable practice, this is something that is acceptable. So I think this does need to be clarified. It does need to be sorted, because the idea that someone can be put out of a meeting for 2 hours, for 2.5 hours, because they interrupted someone, to me, that's not good enough. It doesn't add up, and certainly isn't what I would have imagined was intended when the standing orders were drawn up. So that's my input there, Chair, and I would appreciate maybe a wee bit more clarification on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McAleer. I'll bring the Chief Executive in again. Maybe she wants to add maybe a comment on it.
No, Chair, I've nothing further to add.
Okay. Comments have been noted. Councillor McAleer, thank you. Okay, that's matters arising. We're now moving on to reports for decision, and item 5. And first of all, it's the Chief Executive's Directorate Report, 5.1, Paper A. Chief Executive.
Chair, just simply the formal adoption of the minutes of the Rural Affairs Subcommittee meeting of January, which was chaired by Councillor Warrington. We did provide a verbal update at the last meeting and have progressed the actions accordingly.
Okay, Councillor Warrington, are you happy to propose the adoption of the minute? Okay, have a seconder? Councillor Paul Robinson, and all agreed? Okay. Okay, on to item 6, and it's Corporate Services Governance Directorate Reports. And Councillor Stephen Donnelly, you want to come in, do you, first of all? At the end? Oh. Oh, hold on, I'll ring you in. Just
Okay, go ahead now. No, that's no worries, Chair. I wouldn't mind a little bit of latitude. Just I do want to.
Sorry, if we can have Catherine first.
Yeah, I was
she'll cover a report. I was wondering why you were coming on so early there. Actually,
I was wondering, Chair. No, that's no worries.
Nobody can blame me for keeping people out. You see that? Over to you, Catherine.
Chair, thank you. And members, yes, this is a report on consultations from the last meeting. Just noting at the outset the items for information members, which is on section 3 of the report. So there's one forthcoming consultation, which will be responses presented to the March Policy and Resources Committee meeting, and that's the consultation on emergency general surgery at the South West Acute Hospital. There is one consultation on the draft domestic and sexual abuse strategy for 23 to 2030. And members, due to the pre-election period, a draft response will be prepared and submitted by officers with senior management approval on behalf of the Council. There are 2 consultation members for noting, and those are the HSE pension scheme, proposed amendments to scheme regulations from the Department of Health, and the NICE Quality Consultation Public Health Guidance NG 221, reducing sexually transmitted infections from the Department of Health. And if members wish to submit a response on any of those consultations, they can do so using the hyperlink included within the report. There is one consultation, members, which has been referred to other council departments, and that consultation is on Renewable Energy Support Scheme for Northern Ireland. And members, noting on the bottom of the page 3, consultations which have been submitted since the last Policy and Resources Committee on the one-stop shop implementation plan for the Department of Economy, and a consultation on support for care leavers, and that's the Department of Health. The main item for consideration this evening, members, is the draft response consultation on the autism strategy for Northern Ireland, and that's through the Department of Health, and noting the consultation closes on the 8th of March 23. Officers have drafted a response to that consultation covering all 10 sections of the report, and welcome any comments on that before we move to the recommendations, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine. And now let you in, Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just in this, I'd appreciate a little bit of latitude I may require it.
Okay.
As I do take a great deal of interest on this particular item as somebody who does have an ASD diagnosis myself, and who in the past has been through many of the structures referenced to in this consultation response. So I do just want to offer a few comments based, I suppose, on my own lived experience and indeed based on my interactions with constituents who have been through the system. And I suppose that firstly, what I'd like to say is that a major hurdle we need to overcome as a society is any sense of a preconceived one-size-fits-all approach that can be imposed top-down on autistic people without taking adequate account of the diverse needs that exist across the spectrum and indeed with every individual. Every autistic child will grow up with different aspirations and ideas of what happiness and independence means to them, and all statutory authorities have a moral responsibility to ensure that all is done that can be done to facilitate each of those unique ambitions. So a child struggling in a traditional secondary school setting should be supported with the opportunity and choice as one who wishes to go on to college or to university. And likewise, a young adult who requires particular supported arrangements to enable their move to more independent living should have access to that. And in that regard, I do want to welcome the emphasis on strengthening transition arrangements in the consultation response so that we don't have people falling through the cracks as a result of information gaps or indeed instances of service deficits in education, housing, and mental health support. And on that, I want to welcome also the encouragement of greater signposting and investment. So, Chair, if there's one amendment that I would like to make, and it's only a small one, but I think that it's important, it would be this. In the section on early intervention, one thing that I can remember very clearly from the early 2000s, and I don't think much has changed actually to this day, it's that if you were to go into, I guess, a standard speech therapy class aimed at those on the autistic spectrum with no language ability or perhaps with limited language ability, but who required support with linguistic nuances such as irony and sarcasm, it would have been very heavily dominated by boys. And I suppose that points to two things, which is that on a broad level in future, if we were to see higher rates of autism being published in the public domain, that should not be treated as a bad news story, but actually as a sign of progress that those who previously would have fallen under the radar are actually now being identified. And secondly, that a focus has to be applied to ramping up early diagnosis where it is concerned with young girls, as far too often, because the traits often manifest themselves differently in young girls, it can mean that they are missed. And essentially, we have had generations who essentially have been deprived of the supports that they have been entitled to and that their families needed. So I would ask that a particular emphasis just in early intervention is included in our response, that it's focused on early diagnosis of girls. So thank you, Chair.
Okay. Yep. Just the several parts of this recommendation. Are you happy enough to propose the recommendations with that amendment? Okay. Thanks for that. Moving on now to Councillor Bernie Swift in the chamber.
Margaret Kearlock, and I'll second the proposals. Thank you, Catherine. And I just would like to thank Councillor Donnelly for sharing his experience and his insight on all of the issues. I thank him very much for all of that and fully support everything that he has said. So very well done, Stephen. Thank you very much. Margaret.
Thank you, Councillor Swift. Indeed, a very important subject, and a lot of people affected, as you say, right across the board, well, male and female. Councillor Barry McAduff in the chamber.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that this is a Department of Health-led consultation, but I'm wondering, does there need to be reference to joined-up approach, including the Department of Education? Very many of the issues that come my way as a public representative relate to school-related matters, you know. Very often I turn to people like NAS West and, for example, Caroline Bogue, she's an educational advocate and gets alongside families. The Children's Law Centre as well, find them very helpful. You know, navigating issues within a school setting for parents and children with autism. Very often that's where there's frustration, you know. For example, at the OMA end, you know, some families may want their son or daughter to go to Arvely, but it's not been admitted, by the system, that the parents might think that is the best setting for their child, but there's barriers in the way. So I'm just wondering, has there been cooperation with the likes of NAS West or the Children's Law Centre in formulating this response? And is there scope for making reference to the educational situation with regard to children with autism? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your comments, Councillor McAduff. I'll maybe bring Catherine on those comments by Councillor McAduff.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So they can be added in, and there is actually a full section in the consultation response in relation to the education authorities and some council recommendations around that as well. But if that needs to be added to, then that's quite okay as well.
Okay, thanks, Councillor McAduff. Thanks, Catherine. And now we go to the chamber again, and it's Councillor Rosemary Barton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would make some comments just on section 1 there. It refers to an area that the strategy should consider as a co-design approach between the various stakeholders. I think I would support Councillor McAduff and what he says. I think we've got to have joined up thinking between health and education, because very often you have within schools psychologists report and the child has to wait 2 years, 3 years then to have health, to go and see the consultant within the health authority. And that is not conducive to good education. And therefore, the child's diagnosis is very often held up and means that it's later in being diagnosed and missing out on those vital early years within education.
Thank you, Councillor Barton. Next then to the chamber is Councillor Diane Armstrong.
Thank you. And Catherine, just wanted to ask you, it's an excellent report. Thank you very much. And again, it's on the education, the point of it, support within education. It does talk about support, but I feel very much that young people with autism, one of the biggest challenges they have is self-organisation, and they can lose a lot of their schoolwork, and it all seems a big blur. And that can cause great anxiety when they lose coursework just by not being organised, not being timetabled. I'm aware of that having happened, and I think I just wonder if that could be included as a point, just helping them be organised and allowing them time just to stay calm in their school environment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And this is the work of Louise and her team. I have the nice job of presenting it this evening on her behalf. She sends her apologies for this evening's meeting, and that can absolutely be added in as well. Yeah, I take all those comments back to the team preparing the final draft. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Catherine. And we go to WebEx, and we have Councillor Dr. Josephine Dahan.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank Catherine and Louise and their teams for this excellent consultation document on the autism strategy. Chair, you will be aware that the whole issue of diagnosis and management of autism or autistic spectrum disorder has been a topic that has been discussed in this council and in the legacy Omagh District Council for many, many years. And we know that our constituents have been very distressed at delays to diagnosis and lack of support for families and children who suffer from this condition. Autism is a spectrum and often may go undiagnosed, particularly in girls, as Councillor Stephen Donnelly has alluded to. And I too want to give my thanks to Stephen for sharing his personal experiences with us this evening. In my experience as a public representative and as a doctor, I think that the key, one of the major keys to unlocking this is early diagnosis. And the fact of the matter is that the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service and the ASD service is grossly under-resourced number one. Number two, the threshold that children have to reach before they are accepted for formal assessment seems to me often, Chair, to be set too high. And professionally, I might have to submit 1, 2, or 3 referrals, query ASD, before a child is accepted for assessment. And I think that that needs to be looked at, and I'd be grateful if that could be incorporated into the document. But staffing of those services is important. Child psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers. We had made mention last night of the scarcity of social workers in care of the elderly. It's also true of the child and adolescent mental health services team. So I think there needs to be greater investment in those services. And finally, Chair, I just want to acknowledge the wonderful autism cafes that have been set up in Omagh and in Fermanagh, and compliment all of those involved. They offer support to families of children with autism whilst they're awaiting assessment. And I also want to pay tribute as well to the work of the family support hubs who do excellent work in supporting families through extremely difficult times. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Dehan. And that's all the speakers, either in the chamber or on WebEx. So I'll bring Catherine on now to bring it to a conclusion.
Yeah, so it's just to confirm that those comments from Councillor Deacon will be added in as well. And then members, the recommendations have been already proposed and
yeah, you're happy to propose all the recommendations as the approvals and for the noting and for
subject to the changes. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Okay, so that was just to keep it right. That was all proposed by Councillor Stephen Donnelly and seconded by Councillor Bernice Swift, and we're all agreed. Thank you for that. Okay, we're on to item 6.2 and asked to consider the report on financial matters. That's paper C, and it's over to Catherine.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So members, this evening's report on financial matters includes management accounts for Q3, so that's a period April to December 2022. They're attached at Appendix 1 to seek approval for proposed transfers to reserves and general fund from that Q3 report, and to provide the associated Treasury Management and Prudential Indicator outturn for the same period. Members, also attached for noting in this paper is the Q3 actual penny product from Land and Property Services for 22-23, Q3 D-rating grant from the Department for Communities, and at 3.3 members noting the end of year declaration requirements of members in relation to related party disclosures and register of members' interests. And subject to any queries, members, the attachments are there with the accounts and with the Treasury Management outturn report, is to approve the management accounts for the period ending 31st December, to approve the transfers to the Capital Fund, Renewal and Repairs Fund and the Election Reserve as detailed in paragraph 2.1.3 of the report, to approve the Treasury Management and Prudential Indicator outturn report for the 9 months to 31st December, and to note as well, members, for approval, the reporting arrangements of the management accounts for 22-23 and the new financial year starting in April, the first for 23-24, and members to note the Q3 actual penny product, the Q3 D-rating grant, and the year-end declaration requirements. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Catherine, for all of that. It's quite an extensive report there. So, first of all, we'll go up to the chamber again, and we'll have Councillor Donald O'Coffey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks to Catherine for that presentation and the work that's gone into preparation of these figures. They are, I would say, remarkably benign compared to what I might have envisaged. I have a number of questions really just around the detail of them. There's a significant underspend on a 9-month basis.
Sorry, Councillor, can you speak up to your mic?
Sorry, my apologies, sorry. There's a significant underspend in regard to waste management, community services, and a few other ones there. I imagine that is due to the delay in costs arising that may have been anticipated, but I just wanted to clarify what that was. In regard to the minimum revenue provision, that appears to be a transfer from the revenue fund to enable the council to have a minimum capital reserve, something like that, is it? Just for clarification on that. The other thing is that the movements, there are quite large movements in terms of transfers which were expected to come from reserves now coming to reserves, and equally the other way around when it comes to revenue transfers to capital. But the net impact from what I'm seeing of it there is that is it effectively a £5 million variation in between those two, away from where we would have thought we were? And the final question is in regard to, I see that we have over 2 million held with or invested with 2 other councils, and I'd just like clarification on what councils those are that have that, and whether they, like obviously some of the councils in Northern Ireland have pressing financial situations more than ourselves, and I'm wondering about I see they're A minus, was it A minus minus or A plus minus? AA minus was status, and I'm just wondering about the security of those investments, considering our net reserves have now moved up to 30 million, and of which 2 million is actually with 2 other councils, or at least 1 council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I bring Catherine in maybe to answer some of your queries there, first of all.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Coffey. So the underspend in waste management itself actually relates primarily to reduced tonnages in landfill compared to what was estimated. And the majority of it is landfill, and there are some reduced tonnages in recycling. And we have queried this in detail within the service area, and really since COVID-19, the tonnages have fluctuated quite a bit and continue to do so. There were quite high tonnages of recycling during the COVID pandemic. We did reduce them somewhat in the estimate for 22-23 revised, and they're coming in lower again at the moment than what we had estimated. And having spoken to the waste managers of the service area, that would appear to be typical of when cost pressures are in the family homes and in the environments where people are actually not getting rid of some waste. Yeah. In relation to the other areas, you mentioned community service there in particular. I suppose there's a couple of ways of actually classifying the position that we're at the moment, and Councillor referred to it, that it's probably not what was expected. There has been the pull on vacancies. We have experienced, Thelma will have it in a report later on, staff moving on outside of the council area as well, and there has been a categorisation put right across service areas, and that was discussed at the part of the 22-23 revised estimates in relation to that. The other positive that's coming through in these figures is that some of the fuel charges, and obviously we've benefited mainly from the electricity relief schemes, that wasn't taken into account as part of the estimates process as well. And then the other major, and I'm just bringing it up here for myself just from memory, the other major change from where we were to where we are now really is in relation to additional income right across planning, building control, and off-street car parking. So they are by far the bigger increases. Some of those have been brought about by central government increasing the planning fees, for example, and the other has been brought about by customer demand. In relation to the MRP, so just to remind members again, the MRP is the charge for the repayment of existing loans. And within this current year, and I suppose I spoke about it at the rates as well, as we pay off the loans, the balance is coming down and the charge is also coming down likewise. Through the estimates process as well, and through the 22-23 estimates in particular, there was an element included within that as a charge to a reserve to almost keep the charges of loan repayments static over the next couple of years, to take account of the council's future plans for investing significantly over the next couple of years. That's the capital plans. So that's the MRP, but members might recall from the meeting last week on the rates, that has reduced in the 23-24 year, and will stay at a lower level whilst we pay off the loans and before any future loans are decided upon by the council down the line. In terms of the position that the council is at the 31st of December, the Appendix 1, members, looks at a budget profile for the period against the actual spend for the same period. So the budget profile doesn't always go in sync, take the budget for the 12 months divided by 12, multiplied by 1. So there is a surplus in the year at the 31st of December position, and I suppose we can't really predict what that's going to look like towards the end. Having referred to their members, the update from Land and Property Services will probably bring another positive for the council. And at that stage then, and at this point as well, I'm proposing we move some of those transfers into reserves at this point. So they're actually coming from the surplus and coming from the general fund to the reserves. Most of those have been included within the estimates, and there's one to the capital fund, which I'm seeking approval for, which is with the original amount in the estimates itself. If members can bear with me, I don't have the detail just up on my screen at the moment of the loan, but it's to an English council, not an NI council, but I can provide the member with details of that later on. It is much more secure. The Treasury Management advice is on security, liquidity and yield, and the security of councils is much more superior to investments in institutions. I hope I've covered all, Chair. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Coffey, with all those answers, not the comprehensive way it was done, are you prepared to propose the recommendations as listed? No? Okay. We'll move on to Councillor Warrington in the chamber. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, I will propose the 7 recommendations in 9.1 and 9.2 in their entirety. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Warrington. Okay, have we got a seconder for Councillor Paul Robinson? And I see dissent, but we'll put it. We'll just ask: are we all agreed? Agreed, maybe with the exception of Councillor Coffey hasn't. Maybe I don't know if you're agreeing or disagreeing. Abstaining. Okay. So with an abstention. Okay. Thanks. Thank you very much for that, Catherine. That's very comprehensive indeed. That is all right. 6.3, and to consider the report on procurement and tenders update. And it's paper D, and it's again over to Catherine Leonard, Head of Finance.
Chair, thank you. So there are a number of tenders, contract extensions in this report, members. The first 2 tenders are seeking approval, as we only had 1 tender response for both. Section 2.2 of the report is seeking extension of 5 annual tenders for the provision of services to the council. Section 2.3 has 4 proposals to proceed to tender. 2.4 is seeking approval to use a Crown Commercial Services Framework. And for matters for information, members, are tenders awarded. There are 4 tenders detailed on Section 3 of the paper, and the use of procurement frameworks at Section 3.2. And again, reminding members that the detail behind each of the tenders is included on decision time. There's a suite of proposals, members, at sections 9.1, paragraphs 1 to 4 of the report, and 9.2 is proposals for noting tenders information, subject to any queries, member.
Okay, thanks very much, Catherine. We'll go to the chamber now. We have Councillor Barry McAduff.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It's just a general question. You know, if any of us 40 councillors were contacted by a company and they said, how do you get on the list? You know, I'm not sure about the tendering process. I seen there was a contract awarded there. I'd have loved to have bid for that one. So if they say things like that to you, what should we say back to them?
Thanks, Councillor McAduff. Catherine?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. And this is a question I was actually asked by a member of the public last week. Exactly the same thing. And maybe, members, what I need to do is email yourselves the detail. But generally speaking, there is a generic email address, procurement@fermanahoma.com. There's a link to that. There's also a link on the council's website to be included on the supplier database. That is for all amounts up to £30,000, and then over £30,000, it is all subject to public procurement, which is advertised on the council's website, eTenders NI, and on social media as well.
Thank you, Catherine. And back into, happy enough? Hold on.
That email explanatory note would be very helpful for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Down to the chamber again, and we have Councillor Rosemary Barton.
Thank you, Chair. It's just an observation, or sort of maybe a question also. You know, when you look at the tenders that have been awarded, and it comment after it, one submission was received by the deadline, following assessment, submission has been identified as most economically advantageous based on the sum of such and such. How can you say that when you only have one tender and you've no other tender to compare it to?
Thank you, Councillor Barton. Catherine.
Yeah, through the chair, you know, staff would do some market research to determine the cost of any item that is required, in generally speaking, and you will note where anything then requires some professional expertise, that staff would use other resources within the council, for example, a quality surveyor, et cetera, to give a pre-tender estimate. So before officers even go out to tender, there's an assessment undertaken of the cost. Most economically advantageous is a combination of cost and quality, and that's also detailed there in terms of the assessment criteria. So it's not just looking at cost, it's cost and quality and the whole life cost of the service being provided or the goods delivered. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Barton. Okay, back on the chamber again, with Councillor Donald Coffey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a question on the 2.1.2 design, development and delivery of an employer-led disability inclusion program. I don't recall having seen this. Maybe obviously I should have read something I haven't read, but can I ask if at some point we'd have a bit of an explanation of where that came from, or I take it's within our economic support program that we operate, but it's a fairly obviously developed program, and I'd just like to find out exactly what's involved in it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Coffey. Catherine? Chief Executive, was it? Catherine?
Yeah, it does. Sorry, through the chair, it does come from the Economic Department section and would have been reported to the Regeneration and Community Committee in the past. Yeah, I think it's a labour market partnership, yeah.
Okay. Okay, there's no other speakers. Can we have a proposer and seconder for the recommendations? Councillor Paul Stevenson, seconder by Councillor Tommy Maguire. All agreed? Not seeing any dissent. Thank you again, Catherine, for that one. Okay, we're now on to reports for information, report for information, and it's item 7, Chief Executive Director Report 7.1, paper E.
Thank you, Chair. 2 matters for information. First is a formal confirmation of the Department for Community Circular, which outlines the allowances for members, and the constitution has been updated accordingly. And then the second section of the report, Chair, is information, really by way of a summary on the UK COVID-19 Inquiry Module 1. And you'll have seen from the report that the UK Government is liaising with NILGA as the representative of local government for this module. The subsequent modules are likely to be more technical in detail. So it is possible that there will be more individualised requests as this work goes on, but just recommending in both cases the noting. So firstly, the receipt of the circular, the updated version of the Constitution, and the update on the UK COVID-19 inquiry.
Okay, I'm not seeing any speakers in the chamber or in WebEx. Can we have a proposer and seconder the recommendations? Councillor Adam Gannon, seconded by Councillor Paul Stevenson. We're all agreed? Awesome. On to item 8, and we have correspondence. It's 8.1 to no correspondence from the Education Authority. sorry, we've already dealt with that one. Thank you for that. 8.2, and it's to note details of NAC Learning Weekend. Chief Executive, you want to cover that one?
Well, just, Chair, the details are provided. It's next week in Carlisle, and the details are included together with the cost. So just would be recommending for noting, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Emmett McAleer.
Yeah, Chair, minded that it's in Carlisle and it's £350 plus VAT. I'm happy enough just to note that one and move on to the next item.
Proposed to note. With a seconder for noting. Councillor Keith Elliott. Agreed. Yes, that's that first NEC one. And 8.3. Chief Executive.
Yes, so Chair, this is a more local event in Craigavon, a workshop on leadership and change in local enterprise. I do think it's a little odd scheduling this just before the election, mind you, but not quite sure the sequencing of that. But as you can see, it's proposed for the 23rd of March, no charge for attendance, so the only charge will be travel costs for the event.
Okay. Mr. Emmett McAleer.
Maybe in response to the Chief Executive, maybe the focus will be more on change than on leadership in terms of what's proposed. But again, it is a free event, so I'm happy enough to note that one and propose to note, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, proposed to note by Councillor McAleer.
Seconded.
Councillor Coffey, seconded. The noting. We're all agreed. Okay, thank you. On to item 8.4. Chief Executive.
Yes, Chair, this is really an update report, I suppose, a courtesy report from the Reserve Forces and Cadets Association for Northern Ireland, and it's specific to the Covenant Fund Trust update. So this is funding that's held centrally by RFCA on behalf of the Veterans Champions. So our champion is Councillor Irvine. So in essence, the onus is on Councillor Irvine if he wishes to proceed to arrange any of the events to then liaise with RFCA, who will handle the funding, the finances, and procure the events in question. So just for information, Chair.
Okay, for information, can we have a proposal from seconder to note? Councillor Stephen Donnelly, seconded by Councillor Roy Crawford. And agreed. Thank you. And item 8.5 has already been dealt with, I believe. Yes, that falls into that one. 8.6.
Yes, Chair, this is a separate letter from Derry City and Strabane District Council regarding a recent motion that they adopted, which is very similar in intent to previous discussions that the council has had. But I suppose the most relevant paragraph is really paragraph 4, and it's seeking our support to engage with the Department for Infrastructure, a number of other named councils along the I suppose, the route of the former Great Northern Railway line and the Dublin Government on jointly funding a feasibility study. I know that certainly, I think the indications, Chair, when we submitted to the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review was that there would be government funding for subsequent feasibility studies. So I imagine this is something members would be supportive of, but in so doing, I do think there would be an onus on the governments that they said this was a stated commitment that they would now provide the support for the detailed work.
Thank you, Chief Executive. We'll go to the chamber here now. First up is Councillor Patrick Withers.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to propose noting of the correspondence and also that the suggestion there from Derry and Strabane Council about exploring the possibility of a feasibility study. So I think that should be done, as Alison has said there, we can possibly do a report maybe to see if there's other funding available from central government on that. And also then if it's not available, what cost that would be to ourselves in terms of collaborating with Derry and Strabane. It's also disappointing, Chair. I know that there's been noted there last week just at the All-Ireland Strategic Review, the report and the publication of it's been delayed thanks to there being no minister in place. So once again, we can see the DUP boycott of the executive is causing further detrimental impact. And it's noted there, referenced in the letter as well, that it was the old unionist arm of government that caused this area to be neglected and abandoned, which led to our infrastructure deficit. And that combined with partition, and now we're saying that that can't be addressed again because of the DUP boycott of the Assembly. So it's just an ongoing case there. Chair, So I'm happy to propose that. And also the second reference they have there, I think, is to the Secretary of State whenever they had wrote to them about trying to get a similar scheme that exists in England and Wales as regards restoring your railway scheme. So I think we would also propose that we would write to the Secretary of State for something similar to introduced here. Thank you, Chair. Garmagat.
Thanks very much, Councillor Withers. Well, I can tell you, I'm old enough to remember the closure of the railway in Omagh. I was there as almost a 3-year-old with my late father, who was a signal officer in the railway based in Omagh Station. So I vaguely remember it, but I can say that I was a child of the time. Moving on to the chamber again, and we have Councillor Adam Gannon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm young enough that I have no recollection of anything rail related in the West, unfortunately. But I would love to have memories made in the future if all the plans go ahead. I'm happy to second all of Councillor Withers' proposals there. I think he summed up everything that needs to be proposed in response to this motion. I do think it's important to note as well that there is delays due to political failure at Stormont. There is delays, things that is having an impact. And whilst it's positive to see councils such as Derry and Strabane and ourselves taking a lead on stuff, it shouldn't have to be us taking a lead on it. It should be government ministers and departments. As the Chief Executive stated, this is a priority for them, so they really should be there to do it, in my opinion, and I'm sure others share that opinion around the district as well. But obviously, Chair, I'd like to see the costings before we go further with it, and I think if as well as being said, exploring any funding opportunities, but would be very hopeful to see a positive result from this or some sort of feasibility to get the ball rolling on it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so you're happy to second the noting and the proposals made by Councillor Withers. Okay, and a couple of more speakers coming in here. We have Councillor Donald Coffey in the chamber.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This is obviously something that we would support, but it's kind of disappointing. We see no reference here to the potential for Spur to be going through the Fermanagh area of this new rail network, and it's very important that we would have that. We don't want to see any area of the Northwest being left out of this sort of investment. And I'm just wondering whether it is possible for us as a council to initiate engagement with other councils, in particular those across the border in Leitrim and Sligo and so on, Cavan perhaps, around the possibility of making a case and having our own business plan or strategy for such a connection. Now, I know many members will think it's pie in the sky to imagine a railway will come back to Fermanagh, but I think the world is moving on very quickly. And you look at the commitments that's now been made by the Republic of Ireland government, which is to make a drastic reduction in the number of cars. Petrol and diesel cars will no longer be sold within another 7 years' time. And the idea that everyone's going to suddenly swing into electric when we don't even have sufficient generating capacity appears a bit of a forlorn hope. There's also the potential of hydrogen, and that requires all sorts of investment, and will that be in place in time? The reality is that societies around the world are moving towards mass transit as the solution. China is probably investing more than any other country on super fast mass transit rail, but many European countries are way ahead of where we're at. And I think that our government will have to catch up with that, whether it's in Dublin, London, or Belfast. And I think as a council, we need to be proactive, because by the time they've caught up with it, if we are already ahead of the game with ideas and proposals, then we would be well located to advance more quickly. And I think that is what we should be trying to do at this stage. So I'd like to propose that we have consideration of our options to develop some sort of forward future-proofed ideas around rail transit, including not just in through Omagh, but through Fermanagh as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Coffey. The chamber again with Councillor Tommy Maguire.
I'm going to Carly, and again reminiscing, and I'm minded that now it's very trendy to wear retro clothes, and some of us can remember those clothes. It's actually very retro that some of us can actually remember the railway and had family members that worked on the railway, and I can remember it very well. And again, in the report it says that they closed the railway in '65. I think it was '57 here in Fermanagh. That's right. And I can still remember it. And again, I usually pay some homage to former Councillor Bert Johnson, because it was himself in Fermanagh Council first mentioned the reintroduction of railways. Alex is shaking his head in remembrance of it, but I had the pleasure of seconding his recommendation at the time, so still very supportive of the reintroduction of railways. Not so sure about Councillor O'Coffey's proposal, if it's going to cost a considerable amount of money to the council to engage in our own feasibility study, but would be very minded to support it if funding could be sought externally. I think that would maybe be a more realistic opportunity given the financial restraints we're under at the minute. But it's great to see that it is getting some traction, at least in the minds of people, and that we are considering this. The amount of millions that would be needed to reinstate the railway, I think we all have to be mindful of that. But given the pressures of environmental issues, etc., it is maybe not as forlorn a hope as it would have seemed 10 years ago. So if I could ask Councillor O'Coffey if he'd adjust his feasibility study, our local feasibility study, if it was hinged on potential funding, external funding, to facilitate such a feasibility study. And again, I'm minded that the Shared Island Fund and resources like that may have facilitate that opportunity. Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Maguire. We'll ask Councillor Coffey. He's happy with it.
Chair, thanks. Obviously, I understand that feasibility studies can be expensive. We're spending quite a lot on them in, economic studies at the moment with various projects I could name. I don't think our ambition should be subject to the constraints of, tight budgets, but I'm happy enough to suggest that any feasibility study should consider sources of funding. I think it's absolutely essential. We're not going to put in this rail ourselves. It'll have to be coming from elsewhere, but my emphasis is to try and work with other councils, and perhaps they can contribute as well to the cost of this, and perhaps All Ireland funds or cross-border funds, whatever you want to call them, would help as well. So I've no issue with funding if that's necessary to gain support of the council here. Thank you.
It's a proposal. Are you happy to second that, Councillor Maguire, then? Yeah, okay. Happy to second. Chief Executive wants to make a comment.
It's just a comment, Chair, if members were content. In our work that we did on the submission for the All Ireland Strategic Rail Review, we did engage with neighbouring councils, but also ICBAN, and I'm conscious that all of the councils that Councillor O'Coffey has mentioned are all ICBAN members, and they certainly had done an initial piece of work around or potential scoping for feasibility. So if perhaps with the spirit, we would also, I wouldn't want to cut across anything they're doing, but I'm sure there would be a desire for them to cooperate with us as well.
Thanks, Chief Executive. Going to the chamber again. Now we have Councillor Alex Baird.
Thank you, Chair. I'm probably the only cynic in this chamber about railways, but then that's not the first. Sorry, hark the voice of one crying in the wilderness. The proposal that there is, I'm old enough to remember travelling on steam trains from Coal Island train station to Bangor on Sunday school excursions. I remember helping the local factory bring their wares down to the station, but I'm just looking at the practicality. I mean, there's talk about that GNR line, and I looked at it, went through, it split it, poured it down, went through Oma and came through Enniskillen, if I'm right. But the practicality of reinstating a railway line, look at the problems we've had with greenways, with which I'm a great supporter, the difficulties they have in going along previous railway lines which have been built on the practice of that. Freight's another matter. I mean, in the Republic, they're looking after freight on their trains, but I can't see freight in Northern Ireland being used, even if there's a reinstatement. Public transport is underfunded at the moment, so where is the money going to come from for the railways? And we know the state of roads. So, sorry, that's a lot of cold water. I would love to see the train. I remember the old windows, there was a leather strap and you pull the window up and there was a warning above the windows that said passengers are warned not to put their heads out of the windows. That's because of, yes, I have a fair memory. That's the problem of getting a smut in your eye coming from the old steam train. It had a smell, it had a wonderful way of travelling, and I've travelled on the railway going down from Coleraine to Belfast, a wonderful way of travelling. But sorry, I just think it's a lot of money going to be spent and there will be nothing at the end of it, unfortunately. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Baird. And in Chamber again, Councillor McAduff.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, it's laudable and legitimate to pursue this train, network vision, and we must continue to do that. My own view is that it might happen in a European context in the future. None of us knows what's going to happen in the future, but its best chance might be in a European context. That's point one. Point two, my own mother travelled to school in Donaghmore on the train from Carrickmore, so it's not that far back in history. The Fintna horse-drawn tram, I'd like to light a candle for it. It's in Cultra at this time, and we should consider, a campaign to repatriate the Fintna horse-drawn tram back to its rightful place. I was speaking to Jim McGreevy from the Heritage Lottery Fund today, and he used to work for Museums NI, and I did say to him today, he took it off us in the 50s, and he said, Barry, I wasn't even born. So it's not Jim McGreevy's fault, but ultimately, he would need to get your act together. And just finally, just to reaffirm our commitment to the A5, we always have to do that. It's really, really important. And maybe to seek an assurance that we're progressing that meeting with A5, enough is enough. I know they're meeting with Mid-Ulster and Derry Strabane. We've agreed to do likewise, but just to seek an assurance that that is being progressed. Chair, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McAduff, for your comments. Maybe the Chief Executive, maybe want to comment on that?
Yes, of course it is, Chair, and indeed the other actions associated with the motion as well, all of those are being progressed. And we'll notify members as soon as a date is identified that works for the group.
Okay, and now we're going on to WebEx, and first up is Councillor Matthew Bell.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with a lot of the other speakers there. Firstly, I do agree with Barry that the A5, I think, is a much more, I appreciate that it may be in the distant future still, but it's a lot more closer goal than to the railways. I do share some of my colleague Councillor Baird's cynicism. However, I am a man of ambition, and I do think that the railways need to be progressed, even if it does take a long time, and if this is the first step, or this is one of the first steps, it has to be done. I do agree with Councillor Maguire as well, and I'm glad Councillor Coffey did amend his proposal there, because I would have questions around our council spending that amount of money on a feasibility study. But I would like to make a proposal as well, because at the end of the letter it says here that the council notes the Restoring Your Railway Fund that exists in England. And I would like us to join our neighbouring council and propose that we also write to the NI Secretary of State and the Permanent Secretary of DFI to ask if a similar scheme can be introduced. There was references throughout this meeting of Stormont being down. And if we passed our memory a few years ago, when Sinn Féin had the Assembly down for 3 years, legislation was brought in through Westminster, and well, why not this fund be extended to Northern Ireland if Stormont continues to be down for a number of years, which I suppose the President is there for it to happen. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to bring Chief Executive on here first for comment.
Yeah, no, it's really just to clarify, Chair. So we do have a formal proposal from Councillor Withers, seconded by Councillor Gannon, that we do endorse the motion as submitted by Derry, or as adopted rather, by Derry City and Strabane, which means we will undertake each of the actions identified, including the final paragraph regarding the representations to the Secretary of State and to the Permanent Secretary of DFI. So all of those, if you like, sub-actions have have been approved in the context of the proposal.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Councillor Warrington.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very quick. I agree with a lot of what my colleague beside me.
Seconding Councillor Bell's proposal.
I'll second it, yeah, and agree.
It's not required because it's encompassed, but he's made a proposal, so that's okay. It's encompassed anyway. It's all right.
I agree. It's not often we do agree, but I agree with my colleague beside me that that a lot of the railway is, as much as it would be lovely to see back in land again, it's probably quite a bit away. And certainly it was a bit scary when Councillor Baird mentioned that he actually remembers the old steam locomotives. But we've mentioned obviously the road infrastructure and the A5, and yes, the A5 certainly should be up there as something that's happening quickly. But also, and I brought this up last week briefly, we mustn't forget about the Area 4 as well, leading on to our N16. From Ballagolly on up as well to Enniskillen and out towards Sligo. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. You're happy enough, Councillor Bell, that's those issues have been encompassed into the originals?
No, that's the correct way to do it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Last speaker on this via WebEx is Councillor Seamus Green.
Thank you, Chair. No, just when Councillor Bell there brought in party political points, I'd just like to remind him that it was his party that did away with the railways in this part of the world. And I'd like to remind him that it was his party that ended up Stormont having to come down for near 30 years because of the shenanigans and bigotry that was going on while they were running a one-party state. But anyway, going back to the railway, I'm a wee bit disappointed with the motion that, you know, that Fermanagh and Enniskillen wasn't mentioned in the motion from Derry and Saban Council. And there does seem to be a kind of a momentum gathering about bringing it from Baden down through Omagh across to Portadown, and I think we need to be very active on nailing that it has to come through from Anna, or else a link from that part of it down through Enniskillen and over to Sligo, who already has a railway station up till it that links with Dublin, I think. So I think the proposals that have been made is very good. We need to be getting as much of the infrastructure or potentially together or in place. Just a thought, I suppose long-term thinking, the A5 and the A4, you know, if people were really joining the dots together, would it not be a good idea when they're doing the A5 or the A4 dual carriageway to also do a rail link when they are doing the buying land and all? Would that not be the time to buy land for a rail line as well, that it run alongside these new motorways? Just a thought.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Green. The last speaker definitely on this subject, we spent quite a bit on it now, of time there. So, Councillor Emmett McAleer.
Thanks for letting me in, Chair. Yeah, I would be encouraged to hear, I suppose, any talk about introducing rail or reintroducing rail and improving public transport locally. So, despite the cynicism from others, I think it's something that we should be encouraging and we should be working on reintroducing and improving. I just, on a related note to this, I know we had previously agreed or requested a meeting with the Into the West Rail Group, and I'm sure they were probably involved in the motion up in Derry City and Strabane District Council. And I'm aware that during his brief tenure of infrastructure as infrastructure minister, Mr. O'Dowd actually met with them, where they did talk about improved rail access across the northwest, and that included a line from Omagh to Sligo that went through Enniskillen. So I'm just wondering, in terms of that particular request to meet with Into the West, and given, I suppose, the the imminent timeline that we're on now in terms of the upcoming election. Has there been any progress on that particular meeting? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Chief Executive.
All I know, Chair, is that all of our informals, of which there are many, are being progressed, and what we're trying to do is avoid direct clashes between members day-to-day business. I think it's fair to note that there are likely to be some meetings where, we're trying to avoid daytimes and other things that we're just not going to be able to succeed. But that's certainly on the list, is being progressed with all of the others.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Executive. Very last comment on the subject, Councillor McElduff. Hold on.
Just to acknowledge the Chief Executive's point that I witness on a day-to-day basis serious attempts by Democratic Services to factor in meetings to suit members, and it obviously is fraught with difficulties and scheduling and matrices and all that kind of stuff. So it wouldn't be a simple task to schedule in all the meetings that are in the pipeline between now and the end of March. But I wish them well in doing that, And obviously, the councillor's voice has to be heard, as many meetings as possible in the evening, for example. But it isn't a simple task. I've observed that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor McElduff, for your comments. Councillor Green, can you lower your hand, please, on WebEx? Okay, we're about that to conclusion, and there were couple of proposals there. I think are really all encompassing. Initially by Councillor Patrick Withers, seconded by Councillor Adam Gannon, and then further proposal made by Councillor Donald O'Coffey and seconded by Councillor Maguire. You've all heard the discussion and the comments that have been made right across the chamber. Are we all agreed? Okay, all agreed. Thank you. Okay, we're now on to item 7, and it's the other correspondence. We've received 3 items of other correspondence. Chief Executive.
Yes, Chair, thank you. The first item is from the Northern Ireland Ambulance Service, and it's just formal confirmation from their Chief Executive of the Ambulance Service's willingness to attend a meeting with Mr Guckian, and this followed on from our special council meeting last week, and specifically it was agreed that we would action. We do have it on the agenda for Friday, but we sent the letters out on Friday, Chair, so just bringing that to you at the first available opportunity, and as soon as we receive a response from the Trust, we'll get matters progressed.
Okay, thanks, Chief Executive. Thanks, Adam Gannon.
Thank you, Chair. Understandably, we're waiting on another response there, but I think given Western Trust's process to engagement, I would be keen that we meet with NIAS as soon as possible, simply because, let's say it drags on another month, we'll have a consultation response to do to the consultation on emergency general surgery. And if we do not, and what NIAS say could definitely shape some of our response, because I know myself and I'm sure others in the room have had kind of informal and private discussions with paramedics in the area, and every single one I have spoken to, they've all said they have massive concerns and that they privately feel any mitigations that have been put in place by the Trust just aren't workable and just don't work and just won't work. So appreciating what the Chief Executive said, could I ask that if there isn't a fairly quick response from the Trust, could we get a meeting penciled in with simply just NIAS, even if it has to be informal for us to do that? And as well, I know we were talking about meetings there, that it be in the evening time, because I know many councillors would be very interested in what NIAS have to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Are you proposing to note the correspondence and obviously with your added comments trying to encourage a meeting? Bear in mind that maybe we're not going to get it all in at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, all these informal meetings for March. So I'll let the Chief Executive comment.
No, it's really just to say, Chair, if I'm interpreting Councillor Gannon correctly, that it's really a proposal that we proceed now with a standalone meeting with the Northern Ireland Ambulance Service to get that into the system. This letter followed, I suppose, from last week when it was very much the emphasis on a joint meeting. You'll have seen from earlier in the report which Catherine presented, it's our intention to bring the draft response to the current consultation on South West Acute to the March meeting. So to allow that to happen, we would need to get this in, I agree, imminently. So if Councillor Gannon was content, I think maybe what we're requesting is a standalone meeting with the ambulance service as soon as can be facilitated, noting the issue around availability, but we'll have to work with their availability too. And in the event that we get a response from the trust in the meantime to agree to a joint meeting, we'll get that in as well. But I think to ensure that we have an early input from the ambulance service, we should proceed with the standalone meeting. That'd just be a suggestion.
Okay, happy enough for that?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. And obviously, if we do get a date of NIAS, we can have an open invite to Western Trust as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks again, Councillor Gallant. Did the Chamber again with Councillor Donald Coffey.
Yeah, I'm happy to second the proposal from Councillor Gannon. We definitely need to have a meeting with the ambulance service, and in particular, I'm sure councillors have all seen the correspondence that was indicated, a rationing of provision and responses in rural areas and prioritisation of response in the higher population areas or the higher density areas. That's one concern, and then the secondary concern, obviously, I think Councillor Gannon is referencing it, is that the current regime there's multiple issues around it, but it's hugely reliant on extreme overtime in particular, which is unsustainable and will not be, it cannot continue. So I would envisage that there would be very significant concerns from frontline staff in the ambulance service, and I think we have a lot of questions to ask of those who are directing those services, so I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Okay, so it's been proposed by Councillor Gallant and seconded by Councillor O'Coffey in the noting, and the further proposals proposed by Councillor Gallant and seconded by Councillor O'Coffey. Are we all agreed? Okay, thanks for that. Chief Executive, next please.
Sorry, Chair, thank you. The next item is from NILGA, and this is the updating of NILGA's constitution. So it's appended to the letter, Chair. All of the proposed changes are in red, and you'll have seen from the cover letter that we're invited to comment by no later than the 2nd of March, and that's really to allow the NILGA executive to formally adopt its new constitution so that that'll be in place for the new mandate. So, Chair, I certainly, from our review, from an officer perspective, we would have no concerns of anything that's has been identified. I think it's just really tidying up what's already been there, and just would be recommending that the council has noted it and would respond to NILGA accordingly, that we have no further amendments.
Okay, thanks very much, Chief Executive. And first of all, for noting, and as the Chief Executive has outlined, first up is Councillor Baird.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have the privilege of being a NILGA executive member. We put a lot of work into this. Alison Allen, who has taken over as the chief executive there, has taken the organisation, given a bit of a shake, just a new broom, and a lot of work went into that. If you allow me a bit of an aside and an advertising feature, Thursday the 23rd of February is the NILGA conference in the Silver Birch in Omagh. Now, when this came up, I proposed that all NILGA members should have the availability to go and check. It's just that we had our meeting on Friday there. The numbers they're not small, but they're not as big as they would like to be. So I'm appealing to any NILGA members who would be eligible to go to put their names forward. I think that's the way it was, Alison.
Just on one point of accuracy, Councillor, through you, Chair, the NILGA executive members were proposed to attend. That's what the proposal was, and we have a number of the executive members as confirmed attendance, if I'm interpreting correctly. But we did offer it to all available
members on NILGA from this council.
Yes, but it was the NILGA executive was specified in the proposal. So, but I think what you're saying is if there's any further members who wish to...
That would be rather restrictive, I'm afraid.
Yeah, would wish to register their attendance. I suppose I would agree. No, certainly, Chair. I think we had made the point when we had previously reported it through to the committee that it's rare enough that events are taken west of the ban, and certainly rare that they're taken to our district, and we would certainly be keen for local support as well.
West of the ban put a lot of effort into exerting what little influence we have to ensure that that happens. So if we could have as good a turnout as possible, and there is a breakfast at 9 o'clock funded by Fermanagh and Omagh Council.
Chief Executive.
Chair, if there's any further nominations, because there is a cost, from memory, it's £99 in terms of attendance. So we would need to record nominations if people were wishing to attend, so we can have that formally as an approved duty.
Propose, and anyone interested make contact with Democratic Services to get approval.
No, because there is a financial implication for the council, so we would need the nominations so that we can get those lodged and registered. That would be the normal approach for any conference where there's a cost.
Cannot be dealt with, Chief Executive, cannot be dealt with at one of the special meetings next week. Or from the group leaders. No later than Monday, group leaders. If you've, okay, can we have a bit of... Okay, we can deal with it tonight, or we can leave it to Monday if the group leaders are not sure about this at the minute. Mr. McAleer.
You chair, yeah, £99 breakfast sounds good. I've a question just in relation to the updated constitution. 10.5 at the bottom of page 6 notes that if a council chooses to withdraw from the association, it will be required to give at least 1 year's full notice of its intention to do so. It references 12.1, which actually explains or specifies that not less than 12 months' notice in writing to the chief executive of the association to expire on the 31st of March in any year. So there's actually potentially, if we decided in April, May, June time, an additional almost full year to run on that. I'm just querying what the notice period was previously and why there's such a, to my mind, excessive period of time expected there. And secondly, if we're paying an annual fee to this organisation, is it expected for 2 financial years, even though we have expressed an intent to leave? Thank you.
Chair, I would need to check what the current period of termination is, but I think the reason for the 12 months is in almost the second part of your comment, Councillor. It's based on membership subscriptions, which are quite significant in terms of our contribution. So certainly if there was to be a council or councils choosing to withdraw, it would have a significant financial implication on the organisation. Now, I would have thought if any council was choosing to withdraw, they would coordinate that so they would not, so in our case, we deal with it in the estimates, for example, but you would be giving timely notice so that you wouldn't be exposed for more than the financial year that you've already committed to.
Thank you. Chief Executive. Next up is Councillor Donald O'Coffey in the Chamber.
Yeah, can I ask, obviously, how much is it that we actually are paying to be a member of this? Because I think it was Fermanagh Council, at least. Was it affiliated? Fermanagh District Council? I think it was not. I'm just trying to recall. And obviously, it's up to council whether they affiliate to these structures. I don't know really what we're gaining from it, but it would be interesting to hear how much it costs. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Chair, my recollection, well, we can obviously check in terms of the legacy position, but I thought all 26 members, or sorry, all 26 legacy councils were members. Now, that may have changed over time, I'm not sure. And we can certainly check our subscription. I'm working, I'd be giving you probably the wrong figure entirely from memory, but I certainly think it's in excess of 60,000 plus. I think it's based on resident per capita population normally, so hence the larger population bases pay more, but we can confirm the subscription base in terms of our contribution, and I would caveat my memory may not be accurate, but it is a significant contribution.
Okay, Councillor Baird, I'm going to let you in just very quickly.
Hey, from my memory in the old dispensation, there was one of the councils not a member, but I understand all 11 council are members now. And Fermanagh was definitely a member of NILGA.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Councillor McAleer, second time.
Yeah, I'll propose or second the noting of the letter, but could I, just in relation to the final paragraph then, maybe as part of our feedback query, what I would term an excessive period of time that's being suggested for leaving the organisation, just that we do make note of that when we are going back to NILGA in relation to this. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Dehans, sorry.
I was just going to make one, final comment, Chair, for clarification. Obviously, in the context of the new mandate, we will be bringing a report on. We have a whole variety of subscriptions, NILGA being one, so that will come to the council in terms of the new council's views around membership and participation for the next 4-year period.
Does that satisfy your query there, Councillor McAleer?
Sorry, Chair, and just, yeah, I appreciate that follow-on from the Chief Executive, but I just note that the request is to have this provided by the 2nd of March, so just being mindful of that.
Sorry, Chair, we're saying two different things. I think Councillor McAleer is raising a specific feedback point on the draft constitution.
Okay.
I was just making the point on whether we continue as members will be ultimately a decision. We've made provision this year and the new mandate will consider. That's all.
Okay, and the last speaker on this is via WebEx, and Councillor Dr. Josephine Dehan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, could you just remind me, please, of the date of the meeting in the Silver Birch Hotel, and also to offer my thanks to Councillor Baird for all his hard work on the NILGA executive?
Thursday, the 23rd of February, 2023.
Okay. Well, could I express an interest in attending that, Chair, please?
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Dehan. Okay, if you can lower your hand, Councillor Dehan. There was a couple of proposals made there, so we had it for noting. The NILGA correspondence that was proposed by Councillor Baird, seconded by Councillor McAleer, and I think we're all agreed the noting of it. The NILGA attendance at the conference, it was broadened out. It was initially executive members, now it's executive members plus, and you've heard Councillor Dehan indicating. Clarification?
No, I just, sorry about this, Chair. No, we brought.
That's the right-hand side.
No, we brought the conference for all members. The proposal from the floor was that the NILGA executive attend. And then this evening, we've obviously had requests for additional members. I think it's just important to clarify when it came in first, there was no restrictions placed on attendance. So it came from the council for the NILGA executive to be recommended to attend.
That's what I was trying to say in another way around. So we have changed our position a couple of times here, but okay. I think we're all agreed there because the group leaders are well aware of it by now. Councillor Dehan's indicated that she wishes to attend. Have we proposed and seconded for that? Councillor Swift and Councillor Baird. All agreed. Finally, thank you for that. Okay, and we're on to the next item, and it's from the Northern Ireland Office, Chief Executive. That's right, okay. And you're not commenting on this, okay. Over to Catherine Leonard, Head of Finance.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So members, this correspondence from the Northern Ireland Office is dated 14th of February, and it is in connection with a draft version of scale for the May 2023 elections. The Northern Ireland Office have kept the structure as for the 2019 election, whereby each council is allocated a maximum spend based on its actual electorate. There's also notification of the Deputy Returning Officer fee proposal. Members, this is currently draft and has not yet been approved, but noting in the correspondence, once finalised, councils are legally bound to keep all spending on the delivery of the elections within the maximum amount set. And just noting that the cost of candidates mailing is not included within the maximum. Members, the draft schedule is attached to the correspondence, noting also that the electoral office are expected to incur approximately 70% of the maximum spend figure, and my understanding is that is increased by a couple of percent from the 2019 elections. And just the office has noted that the figures are maximum spend rather than estimates of what is actually covered. In the final paragraph, members, it's seeking an opportunity for any council who wish to consider the draft schedule or any particular specific issue with the schedule or with delivering the election within the maximum to raise those concerns by the 28th of February. I suppose, members, just before any commenting on it, it would appear to adversely impact rural areas. Fermanagh and Omagh District Council would have the lowest maximum spend for administration and staffing across the 11 council areas. And members, you may be aware in the previous mandate that the allocation of the maximum fees was definitely a subject that was raised by the previous council and the impact that that has. And I suppose members, more importantly, noting that the electoral office have increased their percentage of the allocation, and yet we're aware of day-to-day costs and running expenses that would have significantly increased prior to or following the last election. So members, really it's just noting if there are any comments to be brought back to the Northern Ireland Audit Office by the end of this month.
Okay.
Sorry, I said Audit Office, I meant the Northern Ireland Office there, apologies.
Thank you, Catherine, for that. Proposal seconded a note, first of all, and I see Councillor Coffey indicating here, maybe I propose to note it to start up with.
Yeah, I propose to note the report. It appears yet again that the council is being caught with almost a stealth approach by effectively underfunding, which is related to our rurality and our population, and I don't think it reflects the costs of running an election, which are, there's not a huge amount of difference in a way if depending on the electors to do all the steps involved, I'm sure. So it seems to me that a kind of a per capita approach is actually quite unfair to ourselves. So I'd be happy to propose that we would make representations on to at least indicate our lack of satisfaction with the mechanisms and payments proposed, rather the limits imposed, and that this is effectively, putting the council under a lot of strain to achieve an effective electoral process within quite unreasonable constraints. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coffey. Okay. And go to WebEx, and we have Councillor Thomas O'Reilly.
Thank you, Chairman.
Happy to second the note, first of all, Councillor O'Reilly.
I am indeed, Chair, yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so I certainly agree with Donald there that, this is another way of disenfranchising rural people and our citizens of our council area and being able to exercise their democratic vote. And when you bear in mind that we have the largest geographical area and a reduction in our ability to or a reduction in the money provided to run the election, it certainly is going to be more difficult for us than some of the other council areas. And you take into that, Chair, the closure of our local electoral office that was an invaluable service both to this council and to the local citizens within our area. All of that, Chair, just perpetuates this attack on the rural way of living and people living in rural areas, and we're seeing it from all sides. And I think we have to go back to the NI office and robustly point these situations out to them. And Chair, and I'm sure that every councillor is aware, since the electoral office moved centrally, it is much more difficult to get correspondence. It's much more difficult to get cooperation for any issue that you raise with them. And certainly I raised this issue, and Councillor Armstrong and I certainly were at a leisure centre in County Down not so long ago, where we witnessed the provision of an electoral register kiosk being provided in County Down for the citizens there, which is great. We sent correspondence some time ago from this council looking again as to why we were being discriminated against and why there wasn't an equal provision of that electronic kiosk for the citizens of Fermanagh and Omagh. And to my understanding, Chair, we still haven't got any response to that, and we're right on the cusp of an election, and certainly people are going to be disenfranchised in being able to have another means to register if they haven't access to a computer and to broadband. So I'd like to see, Chair, we have some way of being able to directly get onto the electoral office, because I think they've had more than enough time to respond.
Thank you very much, Councillor Riley. I was also there, County Down, on that day, and obviously observed it as well. It is being proposed by Councillor Donald Coffey and seconded by Councillor Thomas O'Reilly for the noting of the correspondence from the Northern Ireland Office. And it's also proposed by Councillor O'Coffey, seconded by Councillor Riley, that we make representations, to put it simply, of FODC dissatisfaction with the situation that we're in. Catherine, do you wish to make any comments, or are you happy enough to take that on board? Okay, are we all agreed? Thank you. Okay, we're now down to item 9, and that's any urgent and relevant business, and I'm not aware of any. No one's raised any issues. So now need a proposer and seconder to go into committee. Councillor Paul Robinson, seconded by Councillor Diane Armstrong. And agreed? So over to you. Joel? Okay, we're now back out of committee, and I ask our Head of Finance, Catherine Leonard, to give a resume of what took place whilst in committee.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members, whilst in committee, members received an update report on confidential staff matters and agreed a course of actions associated with the recommendations included within that report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Catherine. Can we have a proposal seconder? Councillor Diana Armstrong, Councillor Adam Gannon. And all agreed? Okay, that brings our meeting to a close. Thank you for all for your cooperation this evening, and I wish you all a very safe journey home. Meeting closed.